I'll be on. I be Where's Lattenber, and today I'm going to take you for a walk up Mt Tyson, above the township of Tully. It's going to be quite long and steep in parts, so I hope you're fit. Now I think I were quite clever here, because to make this easier on you, I actually filmed it going downhill, so it's not so tiring. Then I just put the film in reverse, so it looks like I'm going uphill. Isn't that clever? Now if I'd filmed it going uphill, well, that would be taking 2 hours instead of half an hour. I'd be shaking with exhaustions and conniptions. Sweat would be dripping all over me camera like raindrops from my skin pores, and all you would hear would be me wheezing and farting in a terrible manner. So it's very lucky I were so clever to think of going backwards. Now this here Mt Tyson, it weren't named after Mike Tyson the boxer. It were named after a man by the name of James Tyson, who were a very rich man back in 1879 when he were a millionaire. And that's a lot of money when you got pounds in the 19th century. Now back in them days, white folk from England were busy taking land away from Aboriginal people, but they found the place names were too hard to pronounce because they didn't know the languages, and they just gave up trying because their tongues were too heavy. So they just made up their own names. But instead of making poetic names like Collywobbles or Bumptious, they just used the names of their bosses, like they were crawling sycophants. It's like they just want the boss to say, "Oh, that's nice, you can have my Rolls Royce," or "You can take my daughter on a picnic," or "Take my husband and make him sore." I mean, like, if I were to make a new name for this hill, I might call it Mount Stampy Cramp. Then, when I were going for a walk up there, my wife would say, "You be careful not to give yourself a cramp stamping up that hill." But if I just tell her, "Well, I'm going up Mt Tyson," well, it don't tell her nothing about where I'm going, so she'll just say, "Well, say hello to Mr. Tyson for me." So this here Mr. Tyson, well, he came here from his kingdom down south, near New South Wales, with 3 of his nephews, and he bought half the land round here. Then he buggered off back home, and he's left his nephews here to plant sugar cane and raise cattle. I'd put money he never set a foot on this here mountain, but it was still named after him because he were the boss. Whew, we're still going. I hope you're not too tired. Well, I thought this here track were going to end back there, but it's still going. Don't know what's happening here. Well, there's lots of plants around here. It's quite nice. There's lots of vegetation. It's getting kind of tiring about now. I'm almost having second thoughts about coming up here, even backwards. Here we are. Now how is that for a view? That's Tully down there. Now, if you can see that island out there, out the back, well, that there's another silliness. That were called Gurunguba. But Captain Cook, well, he named it after his boss, Mr. Dunk, who were not only the 2nd Earl of Halifax, but he were also the 1st Lord of the Admiralty and a sponsor of Cook's voyages. And I reckon Captain Cook were after a pay rise. Now, see that back there, out by the coastline? Well, that there is the mouth of the Tully River. Well, it started off being Englished as the Mackay River in 1843. Then it were called the McAllister River 20 years later. And then in 1872, a surveyor named it Tully after his boss, William Tully, who were the Surveyor General. I think he got a Christmas card that year for his efforts. Now see all them paddocks there? That's all sugar cane, that is. Hectares and hectares of rotten teeth and diabetes. Now down there in the township of Tully, well, that there's the sugar mill, what makes all the diabetes. It were built 100 years ago now, but today it's owned by China Oil and Foodstuffs Corporation, or COFCO. And the boss of that, well, that's Mr. Jun Liu. So it seems to me the name Tully has passed its expiry date. And this here town should be called Liu, not Tully now. Because that's what we colonisers do, see? We name other people's places after our own bosses.